mad he was. You can see the conjunction here between these lines and what we just read. Agamemnon himself said he was mad to disgrace Achilles, the best of the Achaeans. So here we are now with the group, and Achilles, startled, we're told, sprang to his feet, the lyre still in his hands. The little things that our poet breaks. I'm just trying to, okay, let me just for a moment, okay, just for a sec. Let me just suggest to you the genius of this poet, right? Whoever this poet Homer was. We're told Achilles, startled, he jumps up, but he keeps the lyre in his hand, right? Leaving the seat where he sat in peace. It's an interesting word. And seeing the men, Patroclus rose up too, as the famous runner called and waved them on. Welcome! Look, dear friends, have come our way. I must be sorely needed now, my dearest friends, in all the Achaean armies, even in my anger. In other words, something fascinating. It tells you that Achilles has just been waiting. Oh, they will come. You can imagine that he said this to Patroclus. Don't worry, they will come. And when they come, they're going to offer the world to me, and I'm going to tell them no. In the meantime, I'm going to sing songs about great warriors who fight. Because I myself haven't been fighting, I'm going to sing about the fighting. Right? So they have a meal, and after the meal, at line 264, 265, they reached out for the good things that lay at hand, and when they had put aside desire for food and drink, Ajax nodded to Phoenix. Odysseus caught the signal, filled his cup, and lifted it toward Achilles. And now we are at the heart of Book 9. Now we're going to have 3 speeches, so put it in your notes. Rhetorically brilliant speeches. Okay? We want to study each of them in turn, and, important for your notes, we want to study Achilles' response. Now, I'm going to read quite a bit of these speeches just so that you can get a feeling of the rhetorical significance. Think about this. Agamemnon has said, okay, I was wrong. Offer him a bunch of Scooby snacks. I'm still the better man. And then he gives the job to Odysseus, to Ajax, and to Phoenix to say, okay, to Achilles, we need you to come back. You get a sense. Let's you can debate this in your own way, but I think it's fair to say this. We get a sense that Odysseus and Ajax and Phoenix, all 3 know that this is probably not going to work out, right? But they're going to try. They're going to give their best shot at it to try to convince somebody to do what somebody does not want to do. So we'll begin with the speech of Odysseus. And he will begin at line 268, 269, 270. He filled his cup, he lifted it towards Achilles, opening with his toast. Your health, Achilles. We have no lack of a handsome feast, I see, that either in Agamemnon's tents, the son of Atreus, or here and now in yours, we can all banquet here to our heart's content. Notice the first thing he says is, you're equal with Agamemnon in your ability to throw a feast or a party. Right? So already, very subtly, Odysseus is putting on equal par Achilles and Agamemnon. But, he says, it's not the flowing feast that is on our minds now. No, a stark disaster, too much to bear. Achilles, bred by the gods, that is what we are staring in the face, and we are afraid. I want to point out that several times in his speech, Odysseus, the brave Odysseus, will admit, we are afraid. What is he doing? Obviously, rhetorically, he is creating a powerful need for Achilles to come back before we get to any of this thing about the Scooby snacks and the gifts and all of that. All hangs in the balance now. We're back, of course, to Zeus and his scales, aren't we? Whether we save our bench ships or they're destroyed, unless, of course, you put your fighting power in harness. The only way that we're going to survive this is with your help. They have pitched their camp, the Trojans, right at our ships and rampart, those brazen Trojans. They and their far-famed allies, thousands of fires blaze throughout their armies. That's the last lines of the previous book, right? Nothing can stop them now. That's their boast. In other words, that little line, that's their boast. In other words, they're saying nothing is. I wonder, Achilles, if you agree with them or not. In other words, here's your chance to prove the Trojans wrong. Notice all the rhetorical kind of techniques that Odysseus is going to use. They'll hurl themselves against our blackened hulls, and the son of Cronos, Zeus, sends them signs on the right. Zeus's firebolts flashing, and headlong Hector, first mentioned. delirious with his strength. He emphasizes the strength of Hector. Rages, the opening line of our poem, uncontrollably trusting to Zeus. No fear of man or God. Nothing. In other words, Hector has no fear of any kind of man or God. The subtle suggestion is, I wonder if Hector is afraid of you, Achilles. Right? A powerful, rabid frenzy has him in its grip. Notice this notion of madness again, right? Hector prays for the sacred dawn to break at once. He threatens to lop the high horns of our sterns and gut our ships with fire, and all our comrades pinned against the hulls, panicked by thick smoke, he'll rout and kill in blood. A nightmare. And then he says it again. I fear it with all my heart. I fear the gods will carry out his threats, and then it will be our fate to die in Troy, far from the stallion land of Argos. So the opening foray for Odysseus is simple. Man, we're afraid. I don't know if anything can beat this Hector, man. He's pretty serious, and it looks like kind of has Zeus on his side. I know, in other words, subtly, notice what he's saying. I know you've always had Zeus on your side, but I'm not sure Zeus is on your side anymore. I think Zeus is on Hector's side, right? Now the next line, sounding very much like what Dante, or what Virgil will say to Dante the Pilgrim, up on your feet, this is no time to tire. Up with you, now, late as it is. If you want to pull our Argives, our hard-hit armies, clear to the Trojan onslaught. Fail us now? In other words, we're relying on you. You cannot fail us. What a grief it will be to you through all the years to come. No remedy, no way to cure the damage once it's done. Come, while there's still time. Think hard. Now this while there's still time is interesting. It suggests, we don't have a lot of time here. This is a timely discussion we're having. So notice in the kind of calm and peace or whatever that's going on, the suggestion here is, we got to get this thing started now if we're going to have any chance whatsoever of figuring out how we're going to do this. Right? How can you fight off the Argives' fatal day? Oh, old friend. Now he's going to use the personal touch. Old friend, surely your father Peleus, opening line, right? Peleus is mentioned. Urged you, that day he sent you out of Phthia to Agamemnon. My son, he imagines what Peleus' last words to Achilles were. My son, victory is what Athena and Hera will give if they so choose. But you hold in check that proud, fiery spirit of yours inside your chest. Friendship is much better. Vicious quarrels are deadly. Put an end to them at once. Sounding like something we would read out of Plato's Republic, right? The need for harmony if the people are going to live peacefully, right? Vicious quarrels are deadly. Put an end to them at once. Your Achaean comrades, young and old, will exalt you all the more. That was your aged father's parting advice. It must have slipped your mind. The opening foray then is brilliant. It's a brilliant rhetorically structured argument that says, I'm really afraid here, and we're running out of time, and you know what? I'm your pal, and you know what? Your dad said, you got to check that temper of yours, because you got a bad temper, and you don't want to have disharmony, because disharmony makes you look bad, and all the rest of us, we could die because of that rage. So I hope you remember what last words your father said. At that point, we're not going to read it again because we've read it. Odysseus will literally give word for word. And I think what the poet is trying to do is to try and hammer home this notion that Achilles is in fact being offered the entire world. We come back to it at line 361. All this, that entire unbelievable list of everything in the world, right? By the way, Odysseus leaves off the last part about Agamemnon demanding that Achilles know that Agamemnon is the better man. None of that is said ever in this embassy, right? All this Agamemnon would extend to you if you will end your anger. But if you hate the son of Atreus all the more, him and his trozo gifts, in other words, Odysseus is already ready. Maybe it's because he can read the body language of Achilles, who, by the way, has just been sitting listening to all this. We'll get to Achilles' 150 lines of a response here in a bit. He says, at least take pity on all our united forces mauled in battle here. They will honor you. We're back to kleos again, right? Honor you like a god. Think of the glory you will gather in their eyes. In other words, if Time, remember we used these terms of Time and kleos earlier, if Time, Scooby Snacks, stuff, if Time doesn't work for you, then how about kleos? That's what you have to now shift your focus away from the Time, away from the girl, Briseis is, of course, the big one for Achilles. And let's go for the Kleos, right? The glory will gather in their eyes. Now you can kill Hector, seized with murderous frenzy, certain there's not a single fighter is equal, no Achaean brought to Troy in the ships. Now, for once, you can meet the man head on. And it's at this point, then, that Achilles is ready to respond. His response, lines 372 to 522, 150 lines, are truly remarkable. They may be one of the reasons why Socrates will suggest in Plato's Republic that the Iliad not be taught to young school children. Because the great and mighty warrior Achilles, who is, we've been told all the way through this poem, is the greatest warrior. And of course, we're going to see him at the end of the poem, Jack Hector. But here, it's clear that in the time away from the battle, however many days it's obviously been a few, right? Achilles has been thinking about this whole question of time and kleos. That is to say, for your notes, the challenge to the warrior code. Now, you're going to get a sense of the ways in which Achilles is kind of like bringing out this argument as he responds. We will begin at line 374 and following. The famous runner Achilles rose to his challenge. Let's just go ahead and point out, this idea of rising to the challenge is we now have linguistic debate. We now have struggle linguistically. We have fighting. Similar to what Achilles and Agamemnon were doing, only here it's different. Now Achilles is going to come back. This is like a debate. And if you're keeping score, you get to decide, and I hope that you will at 3B, which one of these arguments works best for you. Let's take a look. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, great tactician. I must say what I have to say straight out. Must tell you how I feel and how all this will end. So you won't crowd around me, one after another, coaxing like a murmuring clutch of doves. It's a fun simile, right? In other words, I'm going to deal with this. And then, what some have argued is the most central line of this entire book, some have argued that this line we are about to read shows you what is the primary difference between an Achillean hero and an Odyssean hero. Between the Achilles of the Iliad and Odysseus, for example, of the Odyssey especially. He will say it this way, at line 375 and following. I hate that man, like the very gates of death, who says one thing, but hides another in his heart. I will say it outright. That seems best to me. Now, I think this is an important question. Let's jot it in our notes. When we come to our study of the Odyssey later, we're going to ask this question. What kind of character is Achilles? What kind of character is Odysseus? What kind of narrative structure do we have in the Iliad? And how is it different from the narrative structure of the Odyssey? And we're going to say some things about how the Odyssey has a narrative structure that kind of looks a lot like Odysseus. A man who's crafty with words. We're always talking in circles. A politician, we might say. Achilles, on the other hand, like the Iliad, very direct and to the point and very linear. In other words, if Achilles has a problem with you, he will come up to your face, tell you, and try and jack you. Odysseus has a problem with you, he will say, let's go for a drive to the Badlands, and don't worry about that shovel in the back of my truck. It's only for a few things I need to dig up in the Badlands. Understanding full well Odysseus is going to take you to the Badlands and jack you out there and then bury you somewhere. That's the Odyssean kind of approach. Notice here then Achilles says, I'm going to go straight to the heart of the matter. Okay? I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. I don't like that whole notion of not going to the heart of the matter, kind of talking around. In other words, on one hand, he's already critiqued Odysseus' speech by saying, dude, really? You had to talk on and on and on to get to that? And then he goes to it. Will Agamemnon win me over? In other words, Achilles is seen behind the gifts, the time, the offering of time. The offering of all that stuff is one more way for Agamemnon to prove to Achilles, I'm a better man than you because I can offer all of this to you. And I still have lots left over. And all the stuff, it doesn't matter to me, Agamemnon. Achilles will one-up him and say, it doesn't matter to me either. I don't care anymore about Time, right? Will Agamemnon win me over? Not for all the world, which is ironic because that's pretty much what Agamemnon just offered him, right? Nor will all the rest of Achaea's armies. No. What lasting thanks in the long run for warring with our enemies on and on, no end. What's the point of all this fighting? One and the same lot for the man who hangs back and the man who battles hard. Whoa! No Kleos. Doesn't matter whether you're a hard fighter or whether you hide behind the lines. In the end, everybody just dies. The same honor, he says, awaits the coward and the brave. They go down to death. The fighter who shirks, the one who works to exhaustion. And what's laid up for me? What pittance? Nothing. And after suffering hardships year in, year out, staking my life on the mortal risks of war? Pause for a moment, jot down. What is he saying here about his view of Kleos and teaming? What are your thoughts on it? Just write them down for a second. It's clear. Achilles has had a change of heart. It's clear. Here he is saying, I'm not sure. This whole battle project that we have always been taught, and he seems to suggest, and I have obviously thought so strongly about, I'm not sure any of it makes any sense anymore. And then we get an interesting simile. Like a mother bird hurrying morsels back to her unfledged young, whatever she can catch. But it's all starvation wages for herself. This is a compelling idea. Excuse me. What's the point for the mother bird to take care of her own little birds, and she herself starves? It's silliness. It makes no sense whatsoever. So, for me, he says, many a sleepless night I've bivouacked in harnesses, day after bloody day I've hacked my passage through, fighting other soldiers to win their wives as prizes. We're back to that old notion of the women again. 12 cities of men I've stormed and sacked from shipboard. 11 I claimed by land on the fertile earth of Troy. And from all I dragged off piles of splendid plunder, teammate. Hauled it away and always gave the lot to Agamemnon, that son of Atreus, always skulking behind the lines. That will be significant because at the end of this book, Diomedes is going to suggest to Agamemnon, hey, why don't you get out in the front of the lines and lead us, right? Safe in his fast ships. And he would take it all. He'd parcel out some scraps, but keep the lion's share. Some he'd hand to the lords and kings, prizes of honor, and they hold them still. From me alone, Achilles of all Achaeans, he seizes. He keeps the bride I love. We're back to Briseis. Well, let him better now. Enjoy her to the hilt. Obviously, Agamemnon will have promised that he has not slept with Briseis, and Achilles is like, I don't care. Let him sleep with her now. It's over for me. I got no interest in her. And then he asks it. And this has been the question, kind of standing behind all of the slaughter. And here it is, spoken out loud. Now, of course, we heard some of this earlier from that one kind of fool that Odysseus will jack with Agamemnon's scepter, right? When he said, oh, this is silliness. But here, this is the great warrior Achilles. And he says, why must we battle, Trojans? Line 4-9. Men of Argos. Why did he muster an army, lead us here, that son of Atreus? Why? Why in the world, if not for Helen with her loose and lustrous hair? Are they the only men alive who love their wives, those sons of Atreus? Never. Any decent man, a man with sense, loves his own, cares for his own as deeply as I. I love that woman with all my heart, that I won her like a trophy with my spear, but now that he's torn my honor from my hands, robbed me, lied to me. Don't let him try me now. I know him too well. He'll never win me over. And then you can kind of get a sense that Odysseus is ready to talk, so he says, no, Odysseus. Let him rack his brains with you and the other captains how to fight the raging fire off the ships. Look, what a mighty piece of work he's done without me. Now, it's at this point that we get a sense of the pride of Achilles, and this becomes the tragedy, of course. If we were speaking in Aristotelian language from Poetics, this will be the hubris moment. And, of course, ultimately, what's going to happen is that the guy sitting on the other side of the tent, Patroclus, he's the one that's going to pay for the arrogance and pride of Achilles here. In other words, Achilles says, what have you guys accomplished without me? Why, he says, he's erected a rampart, driven a trench around it, brought enormous and planted stakes to guard it. No use. He still can't block the power of man-killing Hector. In the taunt, you can hear it, right? No. Though as long as I fought on Achaea's lines, Hector had little lust to charge beyond his walls, never ventured beyond the Scaean gates and oak tree, taking us back to the fig tree reference that Andromache made to her husband Hector. Right? There he stood up to me alone one day and barely escaped my onslaught. In other words, when I was fighting, we didn't have this problem with Hector, did we? You can kind of get this subtle sense, right, that Achilles is making his argument about how necessary he is. But now, since I have no desire to battle glorious Hector, tomorrow at daybreak, once I've sacrificed to Zeus and all the gods, and loaded up my holes and launched out on the breakers, watch, my friend. If you'll take the time and care to see me off, you'll see my squadrons sail at dawn, fanning out on the Hellespont that swarms like fish, my crews manning the oarlocks, rowing out with a will, and if the famed god of the earthquake grants a safe passage the third day out, we raise the dark, rich soil of Phthia. There lies my wealth, hordes of it. In other words, he says, I'm sailing away, I'm going back home. All I left behind when I sailed to Troy on this, look what he calls it, insane voyage. And still more hordes from here, gold, ruddy bronze, women sashed and lovely and gleaming gray iron, and I will haul it home. All I want is plunder, all but my prize of honor. In other words, I'm leaving. Now, the obvious question is, dude, why didn't you just leave? The answer, of course, is because he knew he needed to have this conversation. Achilles wanted to see his own brethren get jacked and Agamemnon be shamefaced, and then he could have this conversation, and then he's ready to get in his ships and sail away. He continues, he who gave that price has snatched it back again. What outrage. And it's as if now he starts to get really wound up about Agamemnon. That high and mighty King Agamemnon, that son of Atreus. Go back and tell him all I say. Out in the open too. So in other words, I want you, Odysseus, he says, to be very direct and tell him, I got no interest in him. So whether Achaeans can wheel on him in anger if he still hopes, who knows, to deceive some other comrade. In other words, Achilles, interestingly, rhetorically says, I'm very interested in the way in which Agamemnon is a liar and how he twists people around. I don't want to see him doing that to any of my